Okay, good morning. Welcome to the forum at All Souls. My name is Alex Westerfeld. I'm the moderator today. I've been looking forward to this presentation for a long time. How does learning a trade such as pet grooming play a part in breaking the cycle of poverty? That's going to be the question. So we'll follow our usual format this morning, which is speaker presents for about 30 to 35 minutes, and then we will have opportunity for questions after that for about 20 minutes. So the program is live streamed on YouTube as I speak, so we welcome our online viewers. And you have the opportunity to post your questions in the chat, and we ask them of the speaker on your behalf. For those of you in the audience, please make sure your cell phones are on silent, which actually I just realized mine is not. And I would do that right now. Our speaker today is Natasha Herdman. She's the founding CEO of Pawsperity. Natasha has an undergraduate degree in political science from the University of Iowa, an executive master's degree in public administration from the UMKC Block School of Management. She's passionate about working with individuals who have multiple barriers to entering the workforce. She brings to Pawsperity experience in both staff and volunteer roles at Healing House, Reach Out and Read, Community Link, as well as Stop Child Trafficking Now. Join me in welcoming Natasha.
Hi, thank you for having me. Maybe I'll move that off to the side. So, about 12 years ago, I started working with homeless families in Kansas City, and I learned that so many adults couldn't get jobs due to criminal records, lack of education, lack of job history. And some of the moms that could find employment were making minimum wage and they were working second shift. So they would leave the 6-year-old at home to babysit the 2-year-old because they couldn't afford a real babysitter. Then there were other moms that we helped get into full-time employment, making 10, 12 bucks an hour. And within weeks, they would lose all of their benefits. So that's childcare, housing, food stamps. They would have to quit their job to go back on welfare so they could actually provide food and housing for their kids. And I got to know a lot of the families as I was working with them. And the thing that was really disturbing for me was seeing that their kids were on the exact same path. It was, getting pregnant as teenagers, dropping out of high school, living on the street, selling drugs and their bodies to survive, and a lot of times becoming addicted to those drugs. And I started thinking, 10 years prior to the or before this, I was working in early childhood education. I I used to think that anybody could get a job at McDonald's, and why doesn't everybody just work? And when I had my first son, I realized how stupid that was. I had got my first job. I was making $30,000 working for a nonprofit in DC. And childcare costs for one kid was more than what I netted. And that's when I realized that we needed my income. I couldn't just quit my job, but we also needed childcare. So I actually ended up opening up a childcare center in my house, so I could be at home with my son and still have that income. And to do this, I had to become licensed in early childhood education. So I started taking classes through the county, and that's when I realized that 90% of a child's brain is developed before the age of 5. Um, what happens in those first 5 years of life can really make an impact on what happens for that 80, 90 years of life that's coming. So back to my work with homeless families in Kansas City, the parents that I met with were mainly moms and dads. So mostly single parents. They didn't have a car, they didn't have a home, no job, low reading levels. And the shelter that I worked for barely had any money. So what they would do, if the residents couldn't pay rent, they would have to volunteer for 20 hours a week for the shelter to help it function. So one day I'm in the office, and I barely get paid at this point. And this woman shows up and says that she's here to work for me. And I said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And she said, "I don't know. They told me to come over here and do whatever you told me to do. If you say jump, I'm just supposed to say how high." And so we started talking and we became friends. And she really kept me safe on St. John's Avenue. And I taught her how to parent her kids. She grew up in a gang, and m- mothering really wasn't modeled to her. She could tell you after driving down a street how many lights were on, how many people were out, where I wouldn't notice a thing, but she had counted all of them. And one day she shows up, and her daughter was about a year and a half. And I asked her, I said, how did you get here today? And she said, "Well, I drove." And I said, "Well, where did Sophie ride?" And she said, "Well, next to me." And I said, "Do you have a car seat?" And she said, "No. Do I need one?" And that morning, the baby was crying. And so I asked her, I said, "Have you fed her yet today?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Okay, let's start there." And I could tell that the diaper on the baby had been on for probably a day, maybe longer. And we finally got the baby squared away. Food, some diapers, a car seat, some books. And what was really eye-opening to me was that, and I'm going to call her Jenny, um, she loved her kids just as much as I loved my kids, but she just had no idea on what she was supposed to do. So, so yeah, so this was a few months after that, probably about 4 months after I first met her daughter. My kids were about the same age. So I ended up taking all of us to Chuck E. Cheese, my kids, her kids. We had a great time. I'm walking the baby back to the car, and put Sophie in the car seat. And I realized the car seat wasn't buckled into the car. And I said, "Jenny, you have to buckle this in the car for this to work." And she just looked at me and said, "Well, you didn't tell me that." So I tell you all of this to say that this isn't our program really isn't about, it's not just about a job. It's not just about, budgeting skills, or it's not even just about parenting skills. It's about that entire package that needs to come together to actually change the trajectory of life for these families. And what I realized working with the families that I did was that it is unrealistic to think that a family living in poverty, and homelessness can get out of that situation on their own. And that's why it's so critical that as a community, whether it's government support, nonprofit support, that we are working together to connect all those dots to actually help make that change. So I'm at the homeless shelter. I'm driving home from work one night, and every night when I drove home, it was just devastating because I didn't know how to actually help these families with the overwhelming needs that they had. And I'm driving home, and my mom calls from Iowa, and she says, "Put an ad in the paper. I'll take any warm body who walks through the door and train them." And my mom was a dog groomer in Iowa. And as a kid, I didn't like dirty dogs. So I learned how to do marketing and bookkeeping real fast at 14 years old. And ever since then, even from afar, I would always help my mom with those aspects of the business. And because I did the bookkeeping, I knew how much money my mom made. And she actually, when we were young, had in our garage, my dad had built out a little grooming salon for her, and she groomed dogs in our garage. So when I was at school, that's when she would schedule her dogs. And when I came home from school and experimented with beer or cigarettes, she always caught me and she put me back on track. And one of the things that I've always thought that kids should have is a parent that is always there, especially when they don't want them to be there. So I ended up doing a little bit of research in Kansas City, talked with Petco, PetSmart, and actually interviewed about 40 grooming nonprofits here in Kansas City. I'm sorry, grooming employers in Kansas City. And I learned that all of them said that there was a huge demand for more groomers. And 50% of them said that they would hire somebody with a felony on their record. Most of the folks that I worked with couldn't even get jobs because of those felonies on their record. And so finding a high wage, high demand, family flexible trade was what really needed to happen. So I enrolled at UMKC in grad school to actually figure out how to start and run a nonprofit. And I studied generational poverty for 2 years to find programs that actually worked in changing the lives for these families. So we started in 2016. We had a really small building that the city helped us renovate off of 58th and Troost. It was actually 59th and Troost. We're on 58th and Troost now. But this is how our program works. So when a mom enters our program, we start assessing all of her individual needs. So does she have housing, childcare, mental health, dental, legal? Can she see well enough to groom a dog? All of these services exist in Kansas City, but they're not all connected. And so we work with that student to figure out what do they need to do to be stable enough to be in class for 40 hours a week for 6 months. And then once we have reached this, that's when they move into phase two. So this is 644 hours of hands-on dog grooming. So we actually put social workers on the grooming room floor with our grooming instructors. So we have moments where, about 80% of our families are coming from domestic violence situations. We have moments when a woman is walked in and you can tell that she was badly abused the night before. I mean, we had one woman where you could literally see the strangle marks on her neck. Now, most people would say, "Oh, that poor woman, let's send her home and help her get through this." We say, "No, keep her in class. We need her making money as soon as possible so that she can get out of this situation." And so we actually will put social workers that will come up and start working with her as she's grooming a dog. So we do this so that we can actually move the trajectory. Most of these folks, a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, just get them into work." They're not stable enough for work. They're going to get fired after about 3 days because of the trauma that they're still going through. So this is really a process. And over this 6 months, this is where they're really learning all of that emotion regulation. They're learning how to be more stable. They're learning how to talk with with their supervisors in a meaningful way. So when they graduate, that's not the end. This is when they move into the bridge program. So this is about 18 months long. This is when they're working. They're starting to leave behind some friends or family members that may have been kind of toxic that were holding them back. This is probably the most vulnerable time that they're going to be in. When we started this, we did not have this piece. And our pilot class, we had 6 students in the pilot class, and all of them got jobs on graduation. That's not us, that's the grooming market, that's the industry. And 4 of the 6 lost their jobs within 2 months. And that's why we added this piece. So, a combination of the soft skills, so that emotion regulation, the parenting, the budgeting, that kind of thing, and the bridge program. So this is, like I said, this is when they start losing those benefits. They're scared now. They want to quit, stay on welfare because that's all they've ever known. That's what their parents have always been on. And we say, no, trust us, trust yourself. You can do this. Hang in there. And that's where we provide cash emergency assistance. Donors will help fund this for us. This is where we are working with our nonprofit childcare partners and saying, hey, can you help them cover the cost for a couple of weeks while they get back on their feet? And then also working with our housing organizations to help pay utilities for them. Now, after about 2 years, they have completed the whole program. They're self sustaining, they can take care of their family on their own. So, just a few things. So, I'm going to grab a drink of water real quick here. So, like I said, we started about 8 years ago. We are the only nonprofit grooming school in the country that we're aware of, and there's not a lot of programs that that are set up like ours. There are, but they do exist. So this has really been an experiment for us. And one of the things that we started seeing happen was kids were being taken out of foster care and reunited with their parents because now at least one of them has a job. And one of the things that we look up, because it costs us about $40,000 to put one family through our program over a 2-year period because it's so intensive. And we're always trying to think, okay, is there ways that we can do this cheaper or not? But that heavy investment up front saves you a lot of money for year after year after year later. So a child in foster care for 1 year in Missouri is about $25,000. And if there's 3 kids in the family, you can do the math. And we won't even talk about the other things that happen when kids are not united in a positive family. We saw graduates start opening their own grooming businesses. Moms became role models to their kids. So far, and actually I think it's 140 moms and dads have graduated from our school so far with a 100% job placement rate. The average starting salary is around $43,000 a year, and our highest earner made $95,000 last year. Oh, and then this is a short video that will, and this is actually a little bit older. So we used to be called the Grooming Project. So that's what that's about. Yeah, go ahead.
I had my first child when I was 15. It was pretty tough being so young. Becoming a parent, it was hard. I got rushed into adulthood, becoming a mother at such a young age. Before I came to the Grooming Project, I was working at McDonald's on the night shift, doing 10 to 6 in the morning.
I would have to do like 16-hour shifts in order to make ends meet.
I didn't have the proper education or I didn't have the proper training that they were looking for.
For thousands of women in our city, the starting place becomes a stuck place for them and their children. That's why EPIC, Empower the Parent to Empower the Child, is moving fast to help them beat the odds by creating what they need most: job skills to help break the cycle. The Grooming Project teaches dog grooming and life skills in a 6-month training course and places graduates in well-paying, family-friendly jobs. Jobs they love, jobs that matter.
When I first heard about the Grooming Project, I was at Operation Breakthrough. When I looked into it, I was like, oh, this is like right up my field.
I grew up with animals my whole life, cats, birds. That's just how I was raised. We always had animals in our house.
It was right where I needed to be at the right time in. I didn't think I was gonna like it at first.
I had a lot of anxiety.
When I first started, I did not want to answer phones. I did not want to be around customers. I did not want to talk to anyone.
It's hard, but it's gotten a lot better.
I've been there about 7 or 8 months now, and I've been told that I'm one of the best groomers there. I love it because I'm able to help someone that can't speak for themselves. And I can feel their pain that they're going through if they have a hurt paw, pad, anything. And I can be able to cut their hair.
As our students create daily transformations on their furry clients, they transform their own confidence, their abilities, and their places in the world.
I'm no longer on Section 8. I'm no longer on food stamps, so I'm able to stand and be able to provide for my family. Now that I have moved on, I live in a house now. I have a water bill, a light bill, gas bill. I am not on food stamps or anything. It feels good. No doubt about it. It really feels good. Well, I make anywhere from $2,200 to $2,500 every 2 weeks. I feel good.
The real winners of the Grooming Project, the people it was designed for, are the children.
The Epic Grooming has taught me so much in saving my money and learning how to plan for the future.
My children can see that I'm happy again, that I'm not sad all the time for not having a decent paying job, and I'm not frustrated with trying to figure out how I'm going to pay my bills. It's a real good feeling knowing that I have a job.
The Grooming Project has helped so much because I'm able to be with my children. I'm able to come home with them and interact with them, read, smile, love them, and letting them know that you can always depend on mommy.
Help us speed up the work at the Grooming Project so more families can move forward faster.
So that's a little bit about our program. And now, now we're in a new building, just actually one business over from the old building. And before, where we could only graduate 10 students at a time, we can now graduate, well, I'm sorry, we can only serve 10 students at a time. We could graduate about 20 a year. Now we can serve 50 students at a time, and we'll be looking at graduating 70 to 80 every year. Um, sorry, yeah. Tech is not my thing. Thank you. So how do we pay for all this? Like I said, putting a student through our program is about $40,000 for all the services that they get. So we do this with a combination of things. So we're trying to get more workforce training funds. The struggle that we're at with workforce training funds is that a lot of, so dog grooming is actually lumped into a different job category. It's actually lumped into non-farm animal caretakers, which has a lot of unskilled labor. So a lot of, like janitors, cleaning kennels, that kind of thing at shelters and zoos. So it actually takes the average wage down. So when government looks at this, they say, oh, dog groomers only make 14 bucks an hour, which is not true. And our data can prove that that's not even true with folks that are coming from barriers, multiple barriers to even entering the job market. So we're actually working now to try and get this reclassified. They reclassify every 10 years. We are going to, for the next 3 years, be working to get this pulled out and dog groomers into their own category. The reason why we need to do this is because those job training funds are really critical for what we do. We do get vocational rehab funding. That's about 50% of the population that we serve. That's largely folks with disabilities. Sometimes those going to be learning disabilities, just severe and prolonged depression or addiction to drugs. And then that's about 28,000 per student that they'll pay. So you can see that it's very significant for us to get this fixed. Grooming services is another area that we get money. So we have a Lee Summit salon. Last year that brought in about $460,000. And our salon on Troost, which is our reduced rate grooming services, that brought in $150,000. We think with the growth this year, we'll bring in about $300,000 on Troost with grooming services. We also do doggy daycare services. This is part-time, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's $32 a day per dog. If you get packages, it's cheaper. But all of that money funnels back in to help pay for the student. We give our students a stipend of $125 a week. And then they also get tips on the dogs that they groom. Corporate sponsorships, grants, and then individual donors are the other revenue streams that we have. So like I said, doggy daycare Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So if you guys have any church members, we're not that far, that are looking for doggy daycare, that's a good one. And then grooming, because the reduced rate grooming is actually about half the cost of market rate. So I was actually looking at our pricing the other day because people ask me questions and I feel like I should know this. I was kind of shocked that the highest that we've ever charged for a dog is $60. That's probably why some days I walk into the grooming room and we have like 25 doodles on tables because, a doodle, a poodle, you're looking at $180 to get that groomed out in the market. So you did see Christine on the video. She was actually one of the 2 people that made it from our first class. And she, for the last 3, well, she's been out there for 5 years. For the last 3 years, she's been managing our Lee Summit salon. So this is the one that brought in the $460,000 last year. And she actually manages all the groomers out there that are graduates of our program. And that's a really hard job because our graduates, even like after they get out for the first year, still aren't super stable. So, like, for example, when Jody, who also works out there, she was able to get her kids back from foster care. Well, when you get your kids out of foster care, they have a lot of like regimented, you have to be there at 3 o'clock every day or do this at 8:30. And so we have to be really flexible with schedules to make this all happen before that they're actually kind of really working full time for us. She has navigated all of this so well, and it's always been a dream of hers to own her own business. So this isn't public yet, but hopefully by the time this goes out, it will be. She just signed a lease agreement about 4 miles away from where the salon's currently located. She's going to purchase the equipment and the client list from us. Because we're a nonprofit selling to a for-profit, we have to legally make sure that we're selling at a market rate. We can't give her any perks or anything from this. So we had it professionally valued. She went out and she was able to get a bank loan with one of our banking partners that actually gives bank accounts to unbankable clients, which has been really helpful in them growing that banking relationship. So not only is she now purchasing this business, but she paid off her house last year. And now she's got a very nice, reliable car. So she's actually been one of our top earners, and now moving into that new phase of business ownership. So the other thing that's been really kind of a challenge for us, but it's interesting, and it's something that I think once we can reach the other side of, we'll be okay. So half of our grooming instructors are actually graduates from our program. Now, this is good because they have been taught how to groom in the way that we want them to teach and groom. But the hard part is a lot of our graduates have not, they haven't even, graduated high school, no college education, really haven't been in a professional environment. So teaching those leadership and professional skills in like a really short, quick time has been challenging, but I think that that's something that we're going to have to get better on, just because finding grooming instructors is very hard. It's very hard to find good groomers in the community, but then you have to find good groomers that know how to teach and then know how to teach families that are homeless or really struggling. A lot of our students, when they come in, they do not trust supervisors. They do not trust us. They don't like authority. And so our instructors they take a beating essentially. And but that's just part of the game, and we know it. So that's something that we're working on right now. I'm not going to point out which one this was, but one of those girls in there, she was actually in the pilot class as well. She was homeless, living in her car while she was going to our school. She had really had some temper issues, and there were days that she would come in and you know throw chairs or push tables and yell at people, and to the point where it was really kind of scary. But every day we would say, that's not appropriate. How should you handle this next time? And it was about the 5-month mark when it like finally clicked for her. We had like a Friday meeting. She got real mad. I don't even remember about what, stormed out. And then on the next Monday, and this is what always would happen, she'd get sent into my office. She'd have to sit in the little chair next to my office, tell me how she's going to do it better next time. Well, she beat me to work on Monday, and she was sitting in that little chair, and she said, I know that's not appropriate. It stops now. And it did. And she actually she was making about $50 an hour, $55 an hour out grooming for one of the best grooming salons in Kansas City. And she decided to leave that job making, over $50 an hour to work for us, making 25, $30 an hour, so that she could give back to these other students. So how am I doing on time? Okay. All right. Well, we are wrapping up. So, some of the things that we need are volunteers. So if anybody in the church or that you talk to, is looking for something, I hope you'll send them our way. Or if they have dogs, please send them our way. Like I said, we're not that far away. So um, that's kind of my spiel. So I can open it up to questions, and if that's okay.
Pause for some housekeeping things. So before we start the Q&A, I just want to take care of some housekeeping tasks. One, I just want to express my appreciation to people both here and online for your support of the forum, both in attendance and in financial support. So from September to today's date, we've raised over $3,500 from people's contributions. Half of that has come from the collection that we take up each Sunday. So that's been great. We really appreciate that. It helps us take care of the production costs for the forum. Just by way of reminders, if you're sitting there thinking, man, I wish one of my friends could have seen this, it would be really helpful, or they'd be very interested in it. These programs are rebroadcast as part of KKFI's programming every Tuesday evening at 7 p.m., 9 days past the presentation point. They're also available on our website. If you go to allsoulskc.org and you click on the forum link, we have this, and we have pretty much every forum program for the last several years available there, free of charge. And then finally, I just want to say, I hope people will join us for next week's presentation. The title of that is Ending the Cycle of Violence in Palestine and Israel. It's going to be with Mubarak Awad. Dr. Awad is a Palestinian born in Jerusalem in 1943. Holding U.S. citizenship, he founded the Palestinian Center for the Study of Nonviolence in Jerusalem in 1983. Now, he was expelled from there in 1988 for organizing civil disobedience in the First Intifada. The next year, he founded Nonviolence International, and that group advocates for nonviolence, supports creative, constructive, nonviolent campaigns worldwide, not just in the Mideast. So he and Spencer Graves, Dr. Awad will be presenting here at the forum, but on Saturday before that, which will be this Saturday, he and Spencer Graves are doing a 2-hour workshop on the same topic. And the workshop will have a Q&A period and then a breakout where they do some planning. What are some actions people actually could take or participate in? So there will be a reception at 1:30 in the lobby, and then the workshop starts at 2 and runs till 4. So that program also will be live streamed on our forum channel. So if you can't attend, you could watch it there. There's no charge for that program, but donations would be appreciated. So we're going to turn now to the Q&A portion of this morning's program. And if you'll just form a line over there against the wall, it helps our speaker know how many people are waiting with questions. Again, we'll be monitoring the chat. So if people have questions who are online, put it in the chat and we'll ask it for you.
Hi.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. And looking at what you were talking about and how this organization is set up, you're talking about the last part, and emotional regulation, the outburst. People have been chronically abused or homeless, have a lot of CPTSD as well as PTSD.
Yeah.
How do you feel that works in the fact that they're working with animals on a long-term basis? Do you feel that helps with the emotional regulation and with the social workers in learning how to be out in the public, working with customers face to face as they are slowly leaving that lifestyle and learning to trust again and building up emotional resilience and regulation? Would you speak to that and how that works with the animals in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I've always been told about the human animal bond and the power of that, and I have never believed it. But when I started working with our students, they started telling me that the most the favorite part of their day was when they were at school or they were at work because it was so relaxing for them to work with the dogs. And if you are in a situation where you enjoy your work so much because it is relaxing for you and that's your non-chaotic part of your day, you're going to go to work every day. And what we've started learning, which has been the really cool part, because for me, it's really been about, breaking the cycle of poverty with the two generational approach. We teach parenting classes and all that sort of thing. But the really interesting part is students started telling us that when they were working with a dog on the table, if they are upset, the dog will not let them work with them. So they have to learn so we do a lot of meditation, learn how to calm down, do the breathing before you can go approach the dog. They started doing this with their kids. And that has been the really cool part because by working with those dogs, that's how they're translating that skill with their kids. So yeah, it's a great question.
So one of our online viewers is asking, do you accept male students into your program?
We do now. So about 10% of our population are men now. And we are not restricted just to folks that have parents. They get preference in our program just because the need is a little bit higher. But for younger folks coming out of the foster care system or, in one of those struggling environments, they now can get into our program.
Another question is, how do you use volunteers and what is your greatest volunteer skill set need?
That's a good question. So volunteers, they'll help stock our food pantry. So we get donations from harvesters and then the Mormon church. So they'll go out and pick up that food, bring it back, and then set up a shopping environment for the students, and they get all that food for free. We are actually launching a mentorship program in a few months where people from the community would volunteer as a mentor for our students as they are navigating off of welfare. And then there's a lot of, one of the things that we're really hoping to do is we have a commercial kitchen, start cooking meals for students so that they can just kind of grab and go. So those are kind of our big volunteer needs right now.
It looks like there's a big need for such a thing for all sorts of groups of people who are having problems. Have you thought about a handicap service as well?
A handicap
Or
service.
helping handicapped people get jobs?
Oh, so what's really been interesting. So not necessarily handicap, because just the job is pretty physical. Like you have to be able to go chase a dog. But we have started working with, because of our work with vocational rehab, um, a lot of folks with disabilities. Um, and the really interesting part, so some of these, so for example, we have a girl that um, normally can't work for more than an hour time period alone. She is so fascinated and in love with dogs that, I mean, she will show me her phone and like instead of seeing pictures of her family or friends or something like that on it's all dogs, it's the neighbor's dog, it's everybody's dog. The way that they're able to bond with that dog has really helped make them a really good asset in the program because they can be so focused on it. Another example is we have a guy that I can't remember which war he was in, but he's got pretty severe PTSD. He's a little bit older. Um, he was in our grooming program, but his pet handling skills weren't that good. And once you get to the point where you're using scissors and stuff, we can't keep them in there if they're not good at that. So I said, okay, let's go see if he'll do doggy daycare for 30 days and see what happens. The guy is so funny. He will line up all of the dogs in the morning, give each dog a hug, and go down the row. And this is what really actually helps him control his PTSD. So I mean, it's really interesting what dogs can do with people. So
So what was one of the most unexpected learnings or obstacles or surprises as you developed the program?
So for me, it was so getting started was really hard. I was out trying to get this thing going for about 3 years. I got rejected for about 3 years. Everybody said, great idea. Come back to me when you can prove that this is actually going to work. And then I would say, well, I can't prove it's going to work if you don't give me money to get it started. But the really interesting thing was how many strangers kind of came out of nowhere to just help us get started. It was like there was a lot of like really like mini miracles that happened. So like I'll just give one example. Um, so I was out visiting the site. We had gotten some money to this is the first building that we had to get it renovated because it had been vacant for like 30 years. Um, I realized there's no windows, there's no light. It looks like a prison. It's all like, just cinder blocks. And I asked the contractor, I said, why don't we have any windows or light? And I said, hey, we had to cut that from the budget because we don't have enough money. And it was about 5 hours later that day, one of my board members who does not have a listed phone number in the phone book or online, got a call from a woman in North Carolina that had a nonprofit or she had a foundation and she had to get rid of like $6,000 in the next 2 days. And it had to be for something that was going to improve the learning environment, so like lighting. And the weird thing is, so she was the one that contacted this board member that still doesn't know how she got our information, but she heard about us through the mailman at UMKC. And it was just, I mean, this whole thing. And that wasn't the only one. There was so many things. I wrote a letter to Andis Blades National Corporation, wrote the letter to the president of the company, didn't hear back. It's December. We're supposed to open in 2 weeks. My board won't let me open because we don't have any money and we don't have any equipment. And it's on a Monday when the church is closed, not supposed to be getting any donations. I was officed out of St. Andrew's Church for a while. We got like 20 boxes and it has my name on it. And I'm the only person in the church. I had a key. And I start opening the boxes and it's all of the equipment that we need to open in 2 weeks. And I just started bawling. I'm getting out all of the equipment. The guy never even responded to my letter. He just sent the equipment. Anyway, that gave me, then I went back to my board and I was like, look, something's going on that I don't know what's going on in this world. And we're going to make this happen. And we did. And it was just little things like that. So it was really cool. Those were I wish I had more of those moments back. So.
I'm curious about your greatest source of funding, one, and then two, the number of staff you have, and particularly the professional staff, their qualifications, experience, expertise.
Yeah, so we have about 40 employees, and that includes the League Summit Salon. So probably 8 of those are social workers with master's degrees, and then we've got like 8 grooming instructors. Some of those grooming instructors are coming to us from places like Petco or PetSmart that have been teaching for 10 or 11 years. And then a lot of it's just like support staff to actually run the business. Um, sorry. Okay, so staffing. What was the other part? Okay, so I don't know if I'm allowed to say name. So okay. Um, the McDonald Foundation, the Wiley Foundation, Hall Foundation, Sunderland Foundation, Block Foundation, those are all some of our largest sources of funds. Um, and then we've had a lot of large individual gifts that have helped us kind of keep moving forward. So yeah, and I'm missing one is the Doctors Morals Foundation. And then there's a group of men that are very, J.E. Dunn Sr., who, was in his 90s. Now he's close to 100 or over 100. And his son, Bob Dunn, actually really helped me a lot in connecting me and helping us get funds. So
You said it costs approximately $40,000 per student. And this question is about one, how long are they in the program? And two, what exactly is that covering?
Yeah, so they're in the program for about 2 years. So they get a student stipend for us, which costs about $4,000 for the 2 years that we work with them. Then they get another about $1,000 in emergency assistance, kind of sprinkled out over that time. It pays for all of their books. It pays for all of the equipment that they drop on the floor and break. And it pays for their equipment kits, so they get all the equipment that they would need to start a new job. And then the costs, the higher costs really are we have a 1 to 6 student ratio. So one teacher to 6 students. And to have that low ratio, it just costs more. But we need to have that just because a lot of those folks are coming with learning disabilities. And so that's kind of a big portion. And then the social workers. So our students are going to work with social workers for about 15 hours out of the week, which is it's a lot of time for like a social agency, even to work with one client. And because we have to keep the social work ratios low, so we try and do one social worker to 12 students. Again, that's kind of what drives that price up, but it works. So that's I think the one thing that I've learned from all of this is you have to go all in with a person or a family and invest in them up front if you actually want to see the change get made. And I think as a society, we don't do that. We spent, there's a little money here and a little money there, and when you do that and you don't coordinate stuff, it just costs a lot of money. I mean, we pay almost $1 trillion a year in welfare supports, and it's really not moving the needle. So.
I'm curious, you talked about you're working to reclassify that job title. So I'm curious about, do you have people who are policy oriented as part of your staff? And then what exactly are you doing? What do you have to do to reclassify or see?
Yeah, so we just had a conversation with the animal policy group out of Arizona, actually like 2 weeks ago. They're going to help us build a coalition. So we're going to need like Petco and PetSmart and some of the bigger folks because they're the employers. Because one, I have to prove what skills it takes to be a dog groomer and prove that this is not unskilled labor. Because right now we're in the category of unskilled labor. Then we also have to prove that they make a significant amount of money difference than what the unskilled labor is making. So to do that, I have to be able to tap into Petco and PetSmart's employer database because they're the ones that are doing all this. So we're going to also need to engage the National Groomers Association. And so it's forming this coalition. It's getting all of the partners to pay a little bit of money to keep the essentially lobbyists that we're going to hire to help us make the case and get this broken out. And so we have to start that work now because it's a long process, and 2028 is our only shot unless we're going to wait another 10 years. So.
On the heels of his policy question, and when you were just speaking about the importance of those social workers, the amount of time they're giving, and the video that you showed, can you speak about how important it is that people that are on when she's talking about leaving Section 8 and housing and welfare, but how deeply intricate the paperwork it is that they make people go through, and that even making a single mistake can be so costly to that individual. Here at UU, we have a very deep commitment to interdependence of how much these people need help, even navigating those policies and restrictions and how it can hurt them. That this type of program is so helpful in having people go through that if they don't have the skill sets. Even if you do have the skill sets of a lawyer, it's almost impossible sometimes to extract yourself out of Section 8, to extract yourself out of welfare without the punishment and those emergency funds of which you are speaking. They almost need, because if you even go 10 cents or a penny over, you can be left without food for 45 days to 60 days. Can you address that and how you guys help with that with this type of program?
Yeah, so we walk the student through all of that. It is. It's a nightmare. We have workers with master's degrees that struggle to go through this paperwork. And so I think it's absolutely crazy that we're expecting somebody who is already overwhelmed because they don't know where they're going to sleep that night to try and figure out how to do this level of paperwork. So yeah, so our social workers, that's what they do. That's, a lot of times what we're doing when a student enters the program is getting them on some of the welfare supports, and then we're helping them get off of them as soon as possible. So it's all needed, but yeah, I wish there was a better way of doing this.
In the company that I work for, there is always a calling for unskilled people to come and work for us, but there's a hesitancy to hire people who have convicted felons and whatever. Do you see the possibility that your organization could essentially work with some of these larger corporations to demonstrate how to successfully work with these kinds of people?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So before, when I said that I did my research to see how many people would hire somebody with a felony on their record, and they 50% was the response. It's actually 100%. Every person that's had a felony. So, for example, I've had one girl. She was sentenced to, one woman, 12 years in prison, and the judge gave her 12 years probation if she completed our program. And she did, and she makes like $50,000 a year now, and she's been out for 4 years, and she's doing really well. But I think so. That's a really good question, because could we help them, figure? I don't know. Our goal right now is to train the person well enough in the soft skills and then the hard skills, so that, coming from backgrounds of felonies in prison, that they would be successful in the job. We might be able to at some point kind of figure out what is that secret sauce, because I mean, part of it for us, so while they're, let's say that Sally gets a job at Petco and she's coming from a background, with a felony on her record. We have a job coach that's also a case manager that's working with our student for that first 18 months of employment. And that's the really critical part, because um, what happens a lot is that our students, they don't get fired because of grooming skills. And we do have an 86% retention rate. So it's not everybody's getting fired, but it's those soft skills. It's, don't punch your neighbor, don't yell at your neighbor. Like, if you spend a lot of time in prison trying to survive, or on the streets trying to survive, that is a wildly different skill set than what you need in a professional environment. And so it's just, for us, it's that repetitive practice over and over and over again, so that it becomes a habit, that they're not doing those behaviors that prevented them from keeping a job before.
I want to follow that up with, I would expect that you've encountered racial and ethnic differences in child rearing.
Yeah.
And so how can you talk a little bit about how you've dealt with that?
Well, so, as far as child rearing goes, I don't know that I have seen differences. And I don't work as closely with our families anymore um, as our case managers do now. But when I was working with families, that was actually the thing that gave me so much. Like, for example, I'll kind of go back to the story of Jenny. When I realized that she really did love her kids as much as I love my kids, and she was willing to do anything for her kids, just like I was willing to do anything for my kids, that was the connecting point. The connecting point is just that, yeah, we were all raised differently and different cultures, or whatever. But when it comes down to it, when y'all want the best for your kids, I mean, I think that that's the thing. That's the one thing that joins us across all, colors and cultures and whatever.
From your anecdotes, you are obviously very deeply involved in all your clients and all of your students' lives. and then you said you're about to rescale the organization. How do you see your role, the roles of folks changing as an institution is rescaled?
Yeah. So, and I didn't really talk about expansion at all. We've actually been working with Notre Dame for about 10 months now in South Bend, looking at opening a Pawsperity there. And then we're also working with Notre Dame again next year for basically kind of like a licensing toolkit so that Pawsperity could be spread all over the country. And that's a really good question. What it boils down to is the people that you hire and the outcomes that you're looking for. So, one of the things that we've seen with some of our social workers that have come on, their outcome might be, 50 people got food and, 4 hours of case management was done today. Those are not outcomes that I track. The outcomes that I track are, did they get a job? Did they keep that job? And are they off welfare now? And can they actually support their kid on their own? And so it's really training the people to keep their eye on the right thing, because if you're not thinking about that longer term goal, that actually what impact did we actually make to change this life, if you're not focused on that, then this doesn't work. Because to be honest, I don't care if they got lunch today. Like, I mean, yeah, we want people to eat, but I want them to have lunch every day. And so I think that it's really about what we focus on, and it's having the right staff to do that.
One of our YouTube people has commented or asked about, do you have special training for your groomers to deal with aggressive dogs? And secondly, do you screen some of your applicants from a history of abuse of animal cruelty?
Yeah, so I'll kind of do that one backwards. So yeah, so we do screen for animal cruelty, rape and murder. So those folks we don't take. And then it's funny with aggressive dogs. Um, yes, there are some dogs that we can't groom. And there's a lot of folks. So for example, Christine, who's at our Lee Summit Salon, she can work on dogs that normally have to be sedated to get groomed. She can groom them without any drugs just because I don't know what it is about her, but she can make it happen. And there's a lot of, I think, people, so there's certain staff or students, they're just naturally good at that. And an aggressive dog will trust them and can get the job done. But there are some that we can't groom.
So we're out of time at this point, but Natasha has agreed to join us in the meeting room immediately following for more discussion and questions. And just a reminder, we do have a service that begins in Bragg Auditorium at 10:45, and we encourage you to